Pokémon. For hundreds of years, science has tried to unravel their secrets. Aristotle believed that Pokémons were spawned from the material element, Charmanders born from fireplace ashes, Bulbasaurs growing out of the dirt on cabbage patches. Yes, ancient Greeks believed a lot of weird shit like that. Early Enlightenment scholars postulated that all Pokémons were created at once thousands of years ago in their perfect form by our Lord and Savior Arceus. They also thought blowing smoke at people's asses would resuscitate them somehow. In retrospect, the Enlightenment wasn't very enlightened. It wasn't until Charles Darwin, who famously observed Pokémon transformations in the wild on the Sevii Islands, that we began to uncover the truth. Now you can read all about it in any middle school biology textbook and forget it by the time you start your first job.
Let's evolve some Pokémons.
Disclaimer, I am goofing around. Let me have it. There will be some real science later, I promise.
Hi, I'm in my kitchen. Well, it's actually my best friend's kitchen. I've previously featured his living room and bathroom on this channel, so now we have the full set. I was thinking about how I can make these videos more fun, and I realized, hey, everyone likes science demonstrations. So I am going to evolve this Eevee, which was kindly donated to science by my boyfriend. Your dedication to science communication is appreciated. So, as you probably know, most Pokémons evolve spontaneously upon reaching a certain level. And by level we of course mean hormone level. As Pokémons grow and develop, they slowly gain in weight, muscle mass, and abilities, and eventually, when certain physiological conditions are met and hormones such as growth hormone, thyroid hormones, or sometimes gonadotropin reach appropriate concentrations, a metabolic cascade is activated. Following a period of rapid cell division and differentiation, coupled with programmed cell death, the Pokémon evolves. Other Pokémon, such as Pikachu for example, have endocrine pathways that can keep them in a neotenic form for much longer, sometimes indefinitely. These genetic blocks can be bypassed, using for example evolution stones. They can introduce hormones or neurotransmitters that alter the gene expression and cause induced evolution. Then we have Pokemons like this Eevee, which come in a variety of morphs, all suited to specific ecological niches. Despite what it might seem, all Eevee evolutions are actually the same species. We see a similar variety of forms in plants and animals as well. The specific evolution of Eevee depends on the environment it is exposed to during its development. This phenomenon is known as phenotypic plasticity, and it allows the organism to rapidly adapt to selective pressures. Thanks to modern technology, we can artificially recreate these conditions and control Eevee evolutions. Let's start with some transcription factors. Now we place the Eevee into conditions that will trigger transformation. Do not repeat this at home. I am a scientist. I know what I'm doing.
5 minutes later.
And after the conditions are met, we have successfully locked in our chosen form. Send the lab report to me on Monday. 500 words, APA citation style.
Part 1, Nature's Magic Tricks. Now, as promised, some actual science.
Pepsi bottle, a Coca-Cola glass. I don't give a damn.
So, in case it wasn't obvious, I recently got into Pokemons in 2022 at the age of 24. Yeah, I'm not an early adopter. I'm between catching way too many EVs in Pokemon Go and struggling to boot up a Game Boy Advance simulator on my computer. I thought, hey, I'm an evolutionary biologist, let's make an evolution video with a Pokemon theme. Not just as an excuse to buy some EV plushies. Now, to be honest, the use of the word evolution in Pokemon kinda irritates me because it's not describing what it is actually portraying. What the game is portraying, I think, is metamorphosis, a process that occurs in many living organisms such as jellyfishes, axolotls, and frogs, but is especially well known in insects. Which makes sense. Pokemon's creator, Satoshi Tajiri, was inspired by his childhood hobby of insect collecting. It's kinda ironic actually, cause most bug types suck ass. So I wanted to just talk about metamorphosis, and I'm still going to go over it first, but as a teaser for the later parts, well, I realized there might be more to it, even if the creator didn't intend it. But starting from the beginning, metamorphosis is a biological process of rapid transformation of body form in animal, caused by intense cell division, tissue differentiation, and controlled cell death. The key features of this process is the speed and the degree of transformation. Basically all animals go through changes during their lifespan, but most retain more or less the same body plan, diet, adaptation to their environment, and so on. It would be cool to grow wings during puberty though. Growing wings should be a gender-affirming procedure. Metamorphosis is profound. It's like a second bout of embryonic development that happens after birth, and it happens fast. Some insects, like mosquitoes or mites, take as little as 1 or 2 days to transform. Butterflies usually take less than 2 weeks. In that time, their entire body is literally dissolved into goo and rebuilt from scratch. As their final form, they move in different ways, eat different food, live in different environments from their baby selves. This is often the point. Transforming into butterflies allows the adults to not compete for food and space with the younger siblings or offspring. All of this takes precise coordination of many different hormones, neurotransmitters, and cues from the environment. For tadpoles, this transformation is triggered by thyroid hormones. Absence of this hormone, due to iodine deficiency or some genetic mutation, will prevent transformation. As a result, you might find a tadpole that has continued to grow without developing into a frog. Sometimes they get big, like creepy big. In some animals, such as axolotls, metamorphosis can be blocked or delayed. Some axolotls only develop into adults after they leave water, so trapping them in a tank will keep them in their baby form for their entire life. Some lost the ability to transform altogether and stay neotenic, baby-like, forever. But giving them thyroid hormones as an injection will still do the trick though. But please, not the axolotl song. Please no, I can't take it. Figuring out how all of this shit works was hard, by the way. Not all metamorphosis occurs in a way that is easy to observe. Sometimes baby and adult forms look so unlike each other they end up being classified as separate species for decades. This happened to juvenile T-Rexes, for example, that don't go through metamorphosis but change tremendously during adolescence. Baby or larval forms can also be very cryptic and elusive. Forget Bigfoot, the quest to find baby eels deserves its own movie. So to summarize, if you feel like you are dissolving into goo, keep going. Perhaps you are transforming into a new body form that will reduce competition with your larval offspring by occupying a different ecological niche. I really tried to make this inspirational. And here would be the end of the story, except metamorphosis is not the only way the animal can rapidly change its look and form. There are others. I would like to run through some options real quick, purely to show you some bizarre and fucked up things. You know what's fucked up, for example? Puberty. It's nowhere near as explosive as metamorphosis, but it still makes most people feel like shit for years. Unless you're cool like me and get a second one, which is usually much more pleasant. For humans, the development of secondary sex characteristics and physical growth in height and in weight is the most visible, but there is much more stuff going on inside our heads. Puberty is the time of massive neural pruning. Insane numbers of connections between neurons get destroyed and then re-established. So next time you will be cringing at the stuff your teen self did or said, remember that your brain was under massive reconstruction and that your prefrontal cortex does not stop developing until you're in your mid-20s. Having said all that, human puberty is very mild compared to what many other animals go through. Some develop ridiculous ornaments, like antlers they can barely carry or tails so big they shorten their lifespan. Some have drastically different metabolisms and forms during breeding seasons. They grow a new penis every year, or enter a state in which they can either have sex or literally die. For some, entering puberty and breeding means that their days are numbered. Salmon's bodies go through changes so profound that they just have no way of surviving it. I've mentioned it in my last video, but some animals can actually switch sexes completely. This can either be routine development for them, or it can be caused by certain environmental conditions. For example, male clownfishes will transform into females in the absence of other females. That's one solution for incels, I guess. On the other hand, in animals with extreme sexual dimorphism, differences between males and females, transformation can mean literal dissolution of self. For the sea invertebrate Bonellia, their sex is determined by where a larva will settle on the ocean floor. If it lands on empty ground, it develops into a female, which looks like this. If, however, it lands close to another female, it will develop into a male, which looks like this and lives inside the female's uterus, its whole functioning reduced to producing sperm. Male anglerfishes do a similar thing. They swim around till they find females, after which they bite into them, attach themselves to the female's body, and just stay. Most of their organs, including their brain, then slowly dissolve as their tissues blend in with the female. Eventually, all that is left is a stub on the female's side, with nothing left other than the male's reproductive system. And at the top of the creep-out factor of natural transformations, we have changes induced by parasites, infections, and mutations. Some parasites can actually force sex changes if, for example, they can only be passed on by one kind of gamete. Others can drastically alter their hosts for their purposes, replace their tongues, cause them to swell and grow to enormous proportions, or even compel them to harm themselves to be passed on. Viruses and bacteria can cause severe skin alterations, dissolving of bones, swelling of glands, and other things that I will not show here. And there is no shortage of bizarre mutations you can observe both in humans and other animals. Our shapes and forms are really not as stable as they may seem. Oh, and there's also like environmental morphs, I guess. They're pretty. Here, have some pretty butterfly morphs. I think we all deserve them. I've mentioned embryonic development before. This is something that occurs in most multicellular organisms, but I will focus on animals. Embryonic development is really fascinating, not only because it transforms a single cell into a whole-ass organism, but also because it's kind of awkward and inefficient in many ways. There was this old idea that it repeats every step of evolution. You know, you've all seen these images with how a human fetus will first look like a fish, and then like a reptile, and so on. Well, it's not true, except it kinda is. Basically, it's not that embryonic development repeats the steps of evolution. It's more that evolution creates new body forms by adding more and more steps to the algorithms of development instead of going back and editing them. It's like when you're writing code in R, so imagine you find a mistake in the code, but instead of going back and figuring out what the mistake is, you start adding new lines of code to get it working, so then every time you run the code, you have to keep tweaking it more and more till you forget what it was doing originally. And fuck, or is it just me? People who code, please tell me it's not just me. But yeah, that's sort of how evolution goes. Let's say you have developed an animal with gills and a bone inside of those gills. Later in history, that animal loses the gills and develops more sophisticated hearing. And what you do then is you take the code that you've had before, and it has the gill developing steps, so you do that, and then you dissolve the gills because you don't need them anymore, and you take this bone and you move it and incorporate it into the ear. Sure, it's broken code, but it works, and you're too scared of breaking it even more, so you don't go back and edit. And it stays like that. A human embryo, during the course of its development, will grow a tail, then lose it, usually. It will grow solid blocks of hands and feet and slowly dissolve the tissue in between them to carve out fingers and toes. It will develop a Jacobson organ, only to lose its functionality within the first few weeks of its life. And all of this it will develop out of a single cell over the course of 30-something weeks. By the way, speaking of evolution, I've said that the use of the term Pokemon annoys me because it portrays evolution as something that can happen rapidly and in jumps as opposed to the slow code tweaking. Well, now that I think about it, the Pokemon might be onto something. Let's talk about the Cambrian explosion.
Part 2, evo-devo and the Cambrian explosion.
Paleontology is a tricky science. It's hard enough when your subjects have to be chased around the forest to lure them to traps to be studied. Try doing this when they've been dead for millions of years. It's impossible to tell just how much evolutionary history has been lost to time. The vast majority of dead things do not fossilize. Some are simply too small, like bacteria or single-celled organisms. Some don't have any hard tissues that are likely to leave an imprint. Even a creature with a solid skeleton or shell has to win a death lottery to become a good fossil. So it's not surprising that almost the whole history of life on Earth, over 3 billion out of 3.8, is shrouded in mystery. What we do know, and what to this day puzzles evolutionary biologists, is the way that history has likely developed. This is a rough timeline of evolution. For millions upon millions of years, all we have is bacteria. Bacteria, archaea, possibly some viruses, at some point single-celled or colonial eukaryotes. The timeline, by the way, is based both on rare instances of tiny creatures fossilizing, such as in the case of stromatolites in Australia, and on molecular genetic evidence. Scroll all the way over here, and we get the simplest multicellular animals. Ediacaran creatures were mostly not bilaterally symmetrical, didn't have any organs or interesting behaviors or much of anything really. They were just sort of there, often attached to the seafloor. Sponges, jellyfishes, these creepy fuckers, for millions of years. And then, boom, a rapid, by evolutionary scales, unprecedented, profound diversification of forms. Suddenly we go from a few fossils to hundreds. You could almost call it an explosion. The Cambrian explosion happened around 550 million years ago, and in a geological blink of an eye produced most of the animal forms we see today. Many of the things that dominated Cambrian seas, such as trilobites, are no longer with us, but still, the organism that did survive gave rise to most major clades of modern animals. The causes of the Cambrian explosion are still a hot topic in evolutionary biology. It was likely a combination of many factors, a kind of a chain reaction where one thing led to another until it snowballed. We may never know what was first. It could have been the introduction of predator-prey dynamics or abrupt changes in climate, or it could even be a false impression created by fossilization chances. Theoretically, it was enough for these creatures to evolve only one thing, a mineralized shell or skeleton, to drastically change the picture. Maybe their current animals were super interesting, they just didn't bother to preserve well. There is one explanation that I am particularly fond of though. It is possible that the Cambrian explosion happened because of a fundamental change in how animals developed from embryos and therefore in how they evolved. Let's talk about regulatory DNA and the evo-devo toolkit. So, remember that coding metaphor? Well, as usual, it's much more complicated than that. In truth, embryological development of animals is more like a cooking recipe, or an instruction for IKEA furniture. Basically, it's not that our DNA has detailed instructions for every single step in our development. Instead, it has two kinds of instructions scattered through the genome. Pieces or proteins, and instructions on where and when to put those pieces. That second category is called regulatory DNA, and it is a major evolutionary novelty that likely propelled the diversification of animals around the time of the Cambrian explosion. Without going into too much detail, the use of regulatory genes gives you enormous flexibility. Instead of writing out line by line exactly where and how many fingers or eyes a vertebra an embryo needs to develop, you can simply say, make a finger here, repeat. This is how the Sonic Hedgehog gene works. Yes, they really call the gene Sonic Hedgehog. Ours is the same as that of a fish or a fly or any bilaterally symmetrical animal really. It can give a signal to grow and develop lungs or limbs or split the brain into two hemispheres. When it breaks, it can give you some extra fingers or turn you into a cyclope. As a result, once a trait evolves, it can then be modified in profound ways with a single flip switch. By one single mutation, you can add extra fingers, remove all eyes, stop legs from growing, extend the spine, mix and match the traits how you want. With just a few IKEA furniture pieces, you can make things that look drastically different. Often in one evolutionary step, in one generation. This principle of animal construction likely appeared just before the Cambrian explosion and allowed for the rapid diversification of forms. The so-called evo-devo toolkit, named after evo-devo or evolutionary developmental biology, originated to our common ancestors around that time. The toolkit genes are also remarkably similar across the animal kingdom. Ours look almost the same as that of a fruit fly. Evolution via changes in regulation is an enormous benefit. Not only is it fast, it can also be much safer. Changing just one letter in the sequence of a collagen protein can affect skin, teeth, joints, muscles, nervous and digestive system. Trust me, I would know. Changing the shape of the building blocks can be necessary, but it's risky. Meanwhile, simply adjusting where the protein is expressed, where the building block is put, will only affect that specific area, and the change still happens in one mutation. The specific way in which tissue differentiation and gene regulation happens is very complex and would require multiple videos of their own. For now, what's important is that sometimes evolution does happen in jumps. These jumps still take thousands or even millions of years, but they do appear sudden in the fossil record. One evolutionary framework called punctuated equilibrium imagines evolution as a mostly smooth process that sometimes is interrupted by these jumps, these big evolutionary inventions that lead to sudden changes. On the other hand, some things just don't want to change, like the horseshoe crab. What the fuck is wrong with it? Like, it's a close relative of trilobites that hasn't changed in 200 million years. It has blue blood, and it looks like this, and it has its own clade because all of its cousins have gone extinct, hell knows when. These things terrify me. Anyway, my purpose with this half-hour-long infodump wasn't to give a comprehensive overview of animal transformations or evo-devo or evolutionary genetics in general. I'd love to do that, trust me, but I feel like that would drop my views into negatives. My goal here was to show off a bunch of cool shit and spark your curiosity. If anything in particular caught your PAX gene-regulated eyes, feel free to go into the citations and further reading and learn more about that specific topic. I especially recommend Endless Form's Most Beautiful by Sean B. Carroll. It's the book that got me into evo-devo and it's a fantastic first read on the subject. And to summarize, Pokemon evolutions are probably metamorphoses, but evolution does sometimes go in jumps, in part thanks to the quirks of our genetics. It's just that those jumps take millions of years and don't have an anime girl transformation sequence to go with it. Unfortunately. Oh boy, so this was meant to be a quick and easy video that ended up with over 50 citations. Yeah, I have no self-control. Evo-devo is one of my favorite areas of biology. Like, I wrote my bachelor thesis on regulatory DNA and evolutionary novelty, and I'm hoping to do at least one postdoc on it. That thesis, man, if I will ever have a Patreon, I might put it there, because it's a 50-page long narrative review that I actually really enjoyed writing, so yeah. Anyway, hello to all the new subscribers, including people that came over from the F the Algorithm livestream. I am still in shock that it happened, to be honest. I feel like I won some sort of YouTube lottery. To all of you old and new subscribers who are waiting for more socially and politically involved videos, I have good news for you. I have just started working on a huge project that will spawn multiple videos and I'm really excited about it. And for those who actually want more science, good news for you too, because the project is also about science. I don't want to talk about it yet, but yeah, I wanted to do something like this for years, basically since I first even considered creating a YouTube channel, and I feel like the time for it is now. As usual, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, the easiest way to support me is to like, subscribe and comment. Tell me your favorite Pokemon or your favorite bug, anything. Let's talk about weird creatures. Favorite Cambrian explosion animal. You can also share the link on social media or with friends, it really helps a lot. And if you feel like giving me a tip, I have a coffee page as well, link in the description. Thank you again for sticking around, and see you in the next one.